Welcome to the ICS with Gabe podcast. We're here, we talk about industrial cybersecurity, the latest happenings in the field, and cybersecurity as a whole. I'll also be providing you some tips and some learning resources for getting into this particular flavor of cybersecurity. So again, sit back and welcome to the ICS with Gabe podcast. Welcome back to ICS Gabe. This is episode 4. We are on the 4th episode going down in the history of ICS podcast. So I just thank you for tuning in and just sticking with me during this time. It's COVID-19, so hopefully this can provide you with some listening, some things that can be educational for you as you're going through your COVID-19 experiences. So I just thank you again for attending and listening in on episode 4. And kind of how I start off every podcast is to pretty much talk about what's been going on new with me. I wouldn't say so much new, but this has pretty much been going on. I've been getting into a couple of different publications. Been currently reading through for a customer and just for my own learning. It's a book called Applied Incident Response by Steve Anson. It's a Wiley publication, and a little bit of it, I'm looking at the table of contents. It gets into some subject as it concerns incident response, can kind of get into some of the technical details of it. I mean, some of it is like threat landscape, incident readiness, but even getting down to remote triaging and tools and network security monitoring and disimaging and memory analysis and, you know, all that fun incident response and digital forensics and incident response type of conversation. So been kind of jumping into that a little bit in preparation for some customer ask and even helping with some of our services at my organization. But even looking at, I picked up a book at the ICS summit that happened back in Orlando right before the COVID-19 happened, where everybody had to go on lockdown. But I picked up a book by a gentleman named Andrew Ginter. He actually has his own podcast. It's called the Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast. It's really great. It actually was one of the motivations for me starting my own podcast because he has such great topics and great interviews during that podcast. And again, just Google Andrew Ginter, Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast. Great information. And so the book that I'm looking at his that I picked up at the conference was the Secure Operations Technology. So just starting in that one. So I'll have more to report on that one during probably our next podcast or so. But also, let's see what else has been going on with me. I participated in the SANS digital or virtual conference, the ICS conference. It was led out by the SANS instructors for the industrial control system and also Drago. So it was a very good, so they had a capture the flag one day, and then the next day it was a virtual conference, which went over all types of industrial control system type of conversation. But the CTF was very fun. I mean, the fact that it was on a Thursday was a little bit of a bummer because I had to kind of switch between work and the capture the flag. And then by the time it was the time limit ran out when the capture the flag ended, I was pretty much spent between the two. But it was a lot of fun going through a lot of very it went from kind of common to more advanced methods of looking at industrial control system cybersecurity. They were given it was a scenario, Cyberville or something like that. But they even gave you packet captures and information to really be able to dig deep down inside and really find out the answers to the particular question. So that is going to be coming up pretty soon as it concerns the answers, and the capture the flag is going to be released publicly. So if you're listening to this, you can just Google SANS industrial security, cybersecurity, capture the flag. Information might be out now. I haven't checked lately, but it was a really good capture the flag, and the conference was really good too. Of course, Rob Lee always puts out very good information, and the SANS instructors, very good information. I mean, any IT security subject, but with an ICS flair to it is pretty much the best way that I can speak of that. But all of the conference was recorded, so you can even listen to the conference on back on the back recordings. So yeah, absolutely. So just jump into Google, SANS ICS, Andrew Ginter for Industrial Control System podcast. All the information is out there. So it's kind of what I've been involved with, but let's see what else. Oh, I was also selected to be a part of the advisory board for the ICS, for the SANS ICS Oil and Gas Summit that's happening in October. So I was selected to be a part of the advisory board where we're able to look at different speeches or different talks and be able to approve. And also, I can speak at it too. So, that's really nice as it concerns, because before I was a part of the SANS Summit back in Orlando, and now being part of the advisory board. So I think that's a nice little uptick. So I'm very happy about that, to be involved with the organization. Always great trainings, always great events. So those are some of the things that have been happening with me. But now on to the podcast, right? You want to get to the juicy stuff. You want to get to the information. So this time, as I promised in the third episode, we will be doing an interview. And this interview is with a gentleman. His name is Zohar Rozenberg. If you haven't heard of him, I don't know where you've been, but his name is Zohar Rozenberg, and he is the Chief Security Officer at Elron, which is a leading Israeli holding company dedicated to building technology and very much so investing in startup organizations. Right now, he is the acting member of the board for a number of cybersecurity companies, and as a member at RDC, which is the commercialization arm of the Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, in full partnership with Elron Electric Industries. Zohar, given more information about him, he served in the 8200 Division for over 20 years, leading high-risk, high-innovation organizations and projects with a track record in cultivating new technological initiatives, as well as brilliant and skilled personnel. So he's developed people over his career. Zohar was involved in the establishment of the National Cyber Bureau and the formalization of the Israeli National Cyber Strategy. He retired after serving as the head of IDF's cyber department. And among other achievements, Zohar was responsible for developing nationwide cyber educational programs and working with the Israeli Office of Education and Philanthropy organizations to help place Israel as a global leader in cyber technology. I mean, even with that information, there's even more. Zohar, educationally, he has a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering and an MBA, both from Tel Aviv University, and he also holds the 2008 Israeli Highest Defense Award. So without further ado, we're going to jump in and segue into the interview that I did with Zohar Rozenberg. I hope that you guys enjoy the interview. Hello, Zohar Rozenberg, and welcome to ICS with Gabe. And it's really good. It's really good having you.
Hi, Gabe. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Indeed. As the founder of the Israeli Cyber Bureau and the former head of Israel's cyber defense organization, I really am happy to have you on here and really pick your brain as it concerns cybersecurity in 2020. I know that a lot of people who listen to my podcast are early career cybersecurity practitioners, or maybe even career transitioners. And I wanted to kind of start off the conversation with talking about some of your background and how you got into cybersecurity. And I noticed that you started off in electrical engineering as it concerns what you studied in your undergraduate. Speak to me about electrical engineering and your transition into cyber, and tell me a little bit about that particular journey. And I might have some additional questions to follow up. So what did that look like when you were getting into cybersecurity coming from electrical engineering?
Sure. So I think it's important to remember that, when I went to do my first degree, it was mid 90s. And there wasn't really an internet yet, especially not, vast deployed around the world and with everyone having access. There was hardly any computer networks anywhere. Most computers were standalones. It was a very different world than what we know today. And in those days, I think that it was still a world very much dominated by engineering, and it was so for me as someone who was always interested in science and very curious, and one it was clear to me that I will be somewhere on the science side of things. So for me to go and study engineering was very natural. I have to say I'm very happy that I did that, because I think uh, studying engineering did, at least for me, a few things, but and I know from many others that it's similar to most of them. So the first thing is that engineering sort of rewires your brain on how to think methodologically, logic, how to look at the problem in a very methodic way. The second thing is you really understand what a system is. And I think that's a very big differentiator from many other degrees, aspects, and even from, as you said, cybersecurity practitioners, and also those who graduate from computer science, for example. In engineering, really from the first semester, you learn to look at the system, to analyze the system, and then to take it into parts. You start with the very common um, noun of a black box. So there is a system, you don't know how it's built, but you learn how to analyze it from observing its input and output, and the correlation between them. And only after you understand that, you start going in and go to the white box and start to disassemble things, and then go back up. So the whole understanding of a system, I think that is something that, for me at least, was one of the biggest benefits I could have gained from my education. And I think it's something that helped me throughout my career, of course, also in cybersecurity. So just as I said, to go back, and when I studied cybersecurity, there wasn't cyber, there was hardly information security, sort of different times. And I also worked as an engineer. I did DSPs, programmable logics, boards, everything for a few years. And and then around the end of the 90s, I started feeling that, even though engineering is amazing, and still it is, and it helps you really understand a lot of how the world around you works, but it seemed to me that the glory days of engineering are in the past already. It's not that there is
Mm.
nothing to do. It's not that there isn't anything else to there's no room for innovation. But the glory days are a bit behind us. And I wanted to be part of something that its glory days are still ahead. And around, as I said, 99, 2000, I saw that really the internet sort of started kicking in. Computers were getting to be connected into networks. You could see the very early days of what we now call cyber attacks, and it seemed to me, a great and amazing new world. And as I said, I wanted to be part of something that its glory days are in ahead, and something that I can be a real influencer on how it's going to be built, and be there from the very first moment. So sort of feeling like the first engineers in the early 19th century or early 20th century. I guess they had um, a completely different environment and feeling of what it was to be an engineer than an engineer today in 2020. So for me, it was about that. Why I made a transition. I felt that in engineering, it's great, but I won't get to be a strong influencer. I didn't feel that the glory days are ahead. That it's just going to be improvements, breaking more performance barriers, making things more efficient. But it felt for me that this is not enough for me to satisfy my curiosity and to keep me running for years ahead. Um, and when I looked at the very early days of cyber, it felt to me that that's potentially an amazing opportunity, and I want to be there from the beginning. So I made that transition back then.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting how your experience is so similar even to my own. I actually came out of college around 2012, graduating with a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering. And just that same idea that the glory days of engineering are more behind us. I mean, you see a lot of these roles as quality engineers or process engineers or project engineers, which aren't really the innovators of any type of technology. I mean, Ohm's Law hasn't changed.
Yeah.
P equals IV, right? Like you're not getting anything brand new, at least from those who are first entering into the realm of electrical engineering. So I definitely can get with that whole idea that hey, the glory days are more behind us, or at least I'm not going to be a part of that process anytime soon. So I definitely can see that. So going from ones and zeros, electrical impulses, serial communications in electrical engineering to cybersecurity, what was how did you learn, or what was your learning, I guess, transition? How did you start to go from ones and zeros, electrical engineering, to TCP IP packets, going from that to, just as you mentioned, systems for security, or even with that digital signal processing that you mentioned. How did you get to those TCP IP, OSI layer networking and cybersecurity?
So actually, it was much easier than I had anticipated it would be. And again, I think a big part of it is the experience already in how to learn new things and also how to observe things. So TCP/IP is just another protocol. You have protocols in engineering where you look at, I don't know, if you look at the early days of cellular communications or whatever. So there are protocols everywhere. So once you understand what a protocol is, what are the basic building blocks of a protocol, and how to read and understand a protocol, then it doesn't really matter which one you're looking at. And so that, for me at least, it was fairly easy to start looking into those things. And I started looking into, TCP/IP is the easy part, but things like MIME for email and all the email protocols and the internet protocols, HTTP, those were the maybe a little more complicated things to grasp at the beginning because they follow a different type of rationalism than regular engineerical sort of protocols. But again, I think my ability to look at a system and then try to disassemble it into parts and understand how the different parts are working together, what are the relations between them, and how each of them affects the whole system. So for me, it was fairly easy to get into things quite fast and understand. Um, so I don't know, it just sort of on-job training, so to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And definitely within the military, right? You guys are seeing things firsthand, right? As the founder of or one of the founders of the Israel Cyber Bureau, you guys were seeing the newest and the freshest, or the first hand, I guess, first line of defense as it concerns cyber. And back then, just as you mentioned, it was very early in the communication or cybersecurity in general, that particular field and sector. Now, for people to get into cybersecurity, they have all types of tools like Wireshark and Kali Linux operating system and a TCP dump and all these different tools, command line and GUI type of tools. So it can be a lot easier to be able to look at the information and learn. Back then, when you were getting into cybersecurity, were you guys making tools on the fly? Were you all developing things as you saw them for analysis and detection? What was that like? Were you all just like tool makers in the shed, making things to help you be better at cybersecurity?
So definitely, I have to say that even back then, you could find open source tools here and there. The access was much more difficult. Finding them was much more difficult than it is today. Of course, you couldn't find any online courses like you have today, but there were at least again pieces or building blocks of open source that we, whenever we can find, we would based on that. But above that, definitely we built many different tools that we needed to take us each time another step ahead. So yeah, a lot of things we did were sort of first time. Some of the capabilities we developed, I, as far as I know, we were the first ones to ever develop such capabilities, which again was an amazing experience. The, the curiosity and the satisfaction once you get something like that working are quite extraordinary. So
Indeed.
it was really great back then, and a lot of us, I think today for some it's a little getting to be more of the same. And yeah, everything is already out there, ordered in libraries of open source and online courses and stuff like that. So you don't have to invent things all over again.
Absolutely. And then going from starting in cybersecurity, right, that transition to developing in cybersecurity and developing newer tools and techniques, looking at open source, going from that engineer type of perspective to being a leader, a founder in cybersecurity. What was that transition like? What? How did you go from practicing to leading teams of individuals in order to help with cybersecurity defenses? Just describe that in a couple of sentences or so.
Yes, I think again the basic motivation is subjective. It's personal. For me, I felt that I've had my time with bits and bytes and code, and it wasn't enough for me anymore. I was looking for something more, and I found the more strategic areas, the leadership areas, much more interesting, and areas that I could see myself develop new capabilities and new sort of muscles for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for me, I want to constantly feel that I'm developing, that I'm doing things that I haven't done before, that I'm learning new things. So I felt that this was the right um, passage for me to go to a more strategic things and leadership. And it turned out that I had the right skills and capabilities within me to do that successfully. So I just moved on and on to more strategic things. Started with really managing a sort of research center in cybersecurity. So there, of course, it's about research methodologies and it all the way to profiling the right researchers. How do you even find the right research to be able to accomplish what you want them to do? It's about building teams and building groups and processes and KPIs and things like that. And afterwards, I went more to, okay, how does what we do here connect with things people do in other places, in other units, in other organizations? How can we elaborate more? How can we collaborate? How can we make 1+1 = 3 or even 4?
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, I went to, okay, going back to the systems sort of approach and going into more sort of cyber defense. How do you build a defense for a big organization or for a nation? It's you can be an amazing hacker with amazing capabilities. It doesn't mean you know how to build a real defense.
Absolutely.
That's that's completely different. So it's again going to more strategic thinking. It's being able to see things from the bits and bytes all the way to the people that are using things and to organizational culture and a lot of other things and understand the system with all its dimensions. Some of them are completely technological, some are more psychological, some are again organizational. And how do you understand that system and because before you understand the system, it's very difficult to design the right defense. So step by step, just went to more and more strategic things.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And that's, I mean, absolutely fascinating. I mean, again, just going into your background and looking at all the experiences that you've previously had or have. I mean, it's so cool getting your firsthand uh, description of what all that was like. So, kind of even a point that you just previously brought up as it concerns the psychological aspects of cybersecurity or even the different trends in building defenses. A lot of that really starts with knowing your enemy, right? A lot of military organizations will understand that knowing your enemy is one of your greatest defenses, right? Knowing what your enemy is going to do. And just as this
Yeah.
podcast is called ICS with Gabe, looking at industrial control systems and critical infrastructure. Within the last, I mean, I would say 5 to 8 years or so, critical infrastructure seems to have been something that's been on the minds of hackers and cyber criminals more and more and more. And it's just gained so much more momentum as it concerns an interesting, I guess, or more a publicized version of what hackers are after. But working in the military, I'm sure that you've seen that way more often than what the common cybersecurity professional has seen. The current cybersecurity professional has seen it more within a 5 to 8 years, but I'm sure you've seen this over a number of years. I mean, even towards the point that kind of a small example, the Israel Water Supply Authority was previously hit this past Friday and Saturday. Um, but you've always seen this stuff. I'm sure from your perspective. What are some of your thoughts and ideas as it concerns cyber criminals going after critical infrastructure like nuclear plants and oil and gas facilities and wastewater facilities? What are some of your thoughts about that?
Sure. So I think it's important to remember that cyber attacks usually come from one of two major motivations. There are others, but they're more niche. So the first motivation is strategic. It is mostly between nations, or at least big entities that have strategic goals, and the cyber is just another tool in their toolbox to reach their strategic goals. And I think the earlier years of cyber events around critical infrastructure were more the result of strategic initiatives and less cybercrime. The second motivation is, of course, cybercrime, which is usually about making money. That's why you go to crime. And as time goes by, things are more connected, systems are more open, and the ability to get a high return, so to say, on a cyber attack on a critical infrastructure. So that option is becoming much better, because again, you go 5 years ago and beyond, most critical infrastructure wasn't directly connected to the internet. Most of the systems were very, very closed with dedicated protocols, non-standard. So it's not that it's impossible to attack that. Everything can be attacked, but you would have to put in a lot more energy and effort into making a successful cyber attack, because you really need to understand that system and that protocol, and it's difficult to find how to learn about it and where to see it. If it's, for example, a dedicated Siemens protocol for a specific PLC, you need to put in a lot of effort to get the documentation of that protocol, for example, or to get a PLC and reverse it. It's a lot of effort, and it's not sure that you will be able to get a high enough return on that effort. When you go to the other extreme, for example, so today, to issue a ransomware attack, it's a few cents and you can get back thousands of dollars. So the return is almost infinite. So crime goes to where the probability is high, the return is good, and the lower the effort, better. I think in recent years, since we're going, we're not there, but it's an ongoing trend to those Industry 4.0, and everyone wants to be able to remotely control everything and to remotely monitor everything. And we're already deep in the IoT space. So things are much more connected to the internet with newer types of APIs and open sort of communication. So it's just much easier to target those things today than it was some years ago. I think that's a strong difference that makes a lot more cybercrime turn against those critical infrastructures. Um, and then just another thing is that still today, a lot of the critical infrastructure are sort of traditional entities. And just mentioned, water facilities here in Israel. It's not the cutting edge type of organizations here. It's not the high tech sector. They don't have strong cybersecurity teams. They don't even have a CISO most of the times. So they're also an easier target in that aspect because nobody there really knows what they're doing. The awareness is not that great. They don't have all those layers of cybersecurity in place. So they're an easier target.
Absolutely. And I got three major things from what you just said, which were absolutely awesome. Is the increase in connected critical infrastructure systems. Just as you said before, if you're looking at a Siemens PLC, you would have to get that protocol, look at the documentation, reverse engineer it, understanding how it's connected. Where now, I mean, you have Modbus TCP that's talking directly to the internet, or DMP3, which is typically used within electrical utility organization. Absolutely. So increased attack surface for these attackers is one thing I heard you say. Another thing I heard you say was that the lack of sophistication, or I guess speed, of a lot of these critical infrastructure organizations with adapting to those IT network speeds, right? You have IT environments are moving way faster than the that of critical infrastructure. And the last thing I heard you say, which I think that is a resounding yes, is that hackers are lazy. They are looking for the easiest path to their goal. Those are the three things that I definitely heard you say as it concerns the ideology of attackers and the um, focus on critical infrastructure. It's just easier to get to now, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, super correct. People go to where it's easy to get easy money. Why work hard if you can work with less effort and get the same result?
Absolutely, absolutely, makes a lot of sense. So kind of with the third point that I wanted to address with you is definitely your most recent article, which is entitled "A Cyber Approach to Coronavirus Containment." And I want to talk about a couple of ideas there, because one thing that, that I thought was really interesting, and we talked a little bit on the back chat, as it concerns the idea of the hackers, but even amongst or within uh, COVID 19, there was a recent article put out where bleeping security spoke of certain ransomware hackers, right? And these, 2019 was the year of ransomware, going towards financial institutions, but even healthcare organizations. So organizations like Maze or Doppelpaymer or Ryuk, there was some communications with these organizations and asking them, hey, will you continuously target these healthcare organizations amidst COVID-19? And some of the responses were, we never attack hospitals, orphanages, nursing homes, charitable foundations. Um, Another one had said, the International Health Organization conducts vaccine tests. We follow the news. If there is actual evidence of laboratory working on the vaccine, of course, we will give the key for free, meaning the ransomware key to decrypt information. And then I thought one was really interesting. It said, we also stop all activity versus all kinds of medical organizations until the stabilization of the situation with the virus. And I thought this was super duper fascinating, right? And the whole idea of understanding your adversary. Is this adversaries who with a conscience, adversaries with morals, What are some of your thoughts there? Is this something that you've seen previous, or do you think that this is something that the world pandemic is bringing? It's bringing a conscience to cyber criminals. What are your thoughts there?
So I haven't seen anything like that before, and probably the effect of a global epidemic leaves its mark on everyone. We didn't have such a global crisis, you know, basically since I guess the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
Because even the financial crises of 2000 and 2008, they were really financial, but now it's sort of an all-around type of crisis. It's not just financial. So I think that it is a unique event in latest history, and so maybe it does also affect some of the cyber criminals. But I'm not sure those that are suddenly have some sort of ethics or moral are representing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare sector has been over for 2 3 years already. Sometimes it's the first sector being attacked. Sometimes the second one when you talk about volume of attacks. So they're competing with the financial sector head to head for a number of years now. And even now in COVID times, there are still phishing attacks on hospitals and other healthcare institutions. It's not that it has completely stopped. So maybe some develop the moral because of the situation, but I don't think that is a representation of everyone. I still see a lot of attacks, and I still see, cyber criminals if they were so moral. Um, so obviously, over the past few weeks, phishing around the coronavirus is the number one phishing in the world, and there are tons and tons of phishing emails around coronavirus hitting everyone. So if you're thinking about a very frightened elder or a very frightened mother that is frightened for her children at the beginning of this crisis, and she's trying to look for information on the web on what are the symptoms on or what can she do to maybe protect herself or her children better or her older parents better, and cyber criminals exploiting that and sending her phishing with best 5 things to do to avoid being infected. It's pure phishing, but a lot of people will fall prey to that because they are all on the edge, sort of hysteric, frightened. It's very human.
Mm-hmm.
So I think overall, I'm I'm not impressed with cyber criminals. Getting themselves a higher morality, and I think that the overall cybercrime is just on the rise during this crisis.
Indeed. And even kind of opening it up even a little bit more. And for those who are listening, please Google A Cyber Approach to Coronavirus Containment by Zohar Rozenberg. And you address some of this, right? One thing that I've heard you mention was as it concerns phishing attacks, right, against organizations or this work from home thing. And you give some very practical advice to organizations and to people as it concerns defending themselves against this new slew of phishing attacks targeting scared and fearful individuals. Explain a couple of ideas that you mentioned there. I know that one was definitely phishing, but what are some other things that organizations and people can do to protect themselves from a practical perspective from these cyber criminals and these cyber attacks of today in the midst of COVID?
Yeah, so I think a big part is that many people went to working from home, including myself. And when you're working from the home environment, it's important to understand that it's cyber-wise, it's a different environment than what you're used to because you're working on your home Wi-Fi with other devices connected on your home network that are not secured, not monitored, not anything. And so, my recommendation to organizations is to at least issue a very short and simple set of guidance to their employees working from home. Like once you started working from home, it's a good start to change your Wi-Fi password. It's a good start to make sure that your laptop is at least, patched and has some sort of an endpoint protection. It's a good thing to maybe disconnect other devices from the network once you're working on organization resources from home. Like if you don't need your Alexa or smart TV or whatever to be connected right now, so while you're working, disconnect them because it helps reduce the attack surface once you're online. So sort of, not a very long, but a very practical and simple to perform set of guidance, tips, advice that help people understand that because they're not working in the regular environment and the organization didn't have the time to really properly be ready for something like that, each and every one of us can help in reducing the attack surface and getting the risk a little lower. That includes, of course, all the phishing thing. In these times specifically, if you get an email from someone you don't know, you've never heard of before, don't open it. If it's really important, they'll send it or they'll call you or they'll text you or whatever. But if you don't know who it is, don't open it. Maybe not a good idea right now. Or make sure with your organization that maybe you have a secure way of looking at emails or that your email is being protected in 365 or something else. So just be more aware of what you do, even the small and trivial things that you do, because times are sort of not the same and the threat is not the same. So be more aware.
Even sticking there on the subject of COVID-19, a lot of businesses are noticing that they have to change their business model from that of on site and physical engagement with their services and environments to that of remote administration of cybersecurity services as it concerns defense and even offense. Do you think that artificial intelligence and automation advances in cybersecurity will be pushed more towards the forefront, or what are some of your ideas and outlooks as it concerns technological innovations in this area of cybersecurity as a result of COVID-19? Just want to get some of your thoughts there.
So I completely agree that there is a significant more room for innovation because of the changes caused by the COVID situation. As we just discussed before, working from home is here to stay. Not everyone will stay working from home, but a lot more people will be working from home. And I think it will push organizations faster to the cloud because when you're working remotely, it's just so much easier to do that when you're working with cloud resources than if you have to connect everyone back into the data center at the basement. So I think cloud is going to experience a strong push. Remote technologies are going to experience remote push all the way to infrastructure because I don't know if you've read, but a lot of the world is experiencing bandwidth issues with the internet because how we use internet is suddenly completely different. And a lot of people don't have very good sustainable bandwidth at their homes. So that is also going to get a significant push, whether it's 5G or fiber to the home or whatever. And of course, every technology that gets a strong push ahead or every new technology also has its cybersecurity needs and derivatives. So I think cybersecurity will experience a significant increase in demand for the new architectures, approaches, and way people work. I think AI and automation are definitely part of it. I'm not sure that's the major thing that will solve everything, but I think it will definitely be a big part of the solution. Again, we're looking at the example of many people working remotely, and the day-to-day interaction with the IT suddenly becomes a little more friction, based, and you also want to monitor everyone much closer because they're home. And so, if before you had monitoring on the network inside the organization, that sort of becomes irrelevant. You need new type of monitoring, but it's a dispersed monitoring because everyone is in different locations, and you also need to monitor access, and you want to monitor who's doing what, where, and when, and all those things. When you're looking at a large scale remotely, probably won't happen without automation and AI. It's impossible to do that manually. It's not that it was very easy to do that manually, even when everyone is working from the office. But now it just takes a much stronger effect. Each and every one of us at home, again with a different environment, you want still visibility and policy enforcement and identity and everything, and you want to make sure that you're not taking on a higher risk than what you used to, because otherwise you need to change a lot of other things. So I think automation and AI will be significant parts of the solutions, but the solution will start from how do I even enable each and every employee to access all the resources they need, even when working from home or any other place. And how do I gain visibility into what they're doing? How do I enforce the right policy? How do I, by the way, solve the growing tension between privacy and the organization's needs? Because when I'm working from home and you want visibility into what I'm doing, then you're intrinsically going into privacy issues because it's my home. I'm doing other things from home, and you're going to have some sort of visibility to that. So I think the tension between privacy and work, which it's not new, but it's going to be very much intensified right now. And so again, I think automation AI are going to be a significant part of being able to handle that on a large scale.
I think that's the perfect segue into giving more information about the Elron Electronic Industries, where you sit as the chief security officer of the organization, where you guys are actively involved in investing in startups and future technologies within cybersecurity and other industries. Could you give us an overview of what your organization does and the technologies that you invest in?
Sure. So we are a Israeli VC based in Tel Aviv. We're early stage investors. Um, and we have been investing in cybersecurity for the last 5 years. Elron has been around for almost 60 years. It's basically the first VC in Israel, responsible for establishing some of the biggest high-tech companies in Israel today. So 5 years ago, we started doing cybersecurity, and we're making investments all the time. We even currently we're looking at a number of companies and maybe close another new investment in the next 2-3 weeks. And we're trying to, like everyone else probably, but find what's the next niche, or what's the next area that we should be investing in. Currently, we're looking at a lot of things around data security in the cloud. It's a very hot area. We're looking at SaaS security because it's a growing pain with organizations today having dozens to hundreds of SaaS applications, and each one of them with its own security policy, security dashboard, and it's impossible to just manage that one by one. So it's a growing pain and a problem. So we're looking at that space. We are looking, by the way, at the still at around the OT space, not necessarily critical infrastructure, but OT space. You have more and more, smart buildings where everything is connected, from the elevator to the HVAC to whatever. And again, you're going now to companies that their purpose in life is to manage buildings. They have no idea what security is. They don't have a security team. They don't have a CISO, but everything is connected, really. And so, what's the right angle to solve that need? So these are, I think, some of the areas that we're looking at present.
As you say that, it reminds me of the initial attack vector for the Target breach, which was actually a business management system, right? For, I believe, a HVAC system or something
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Target. And then they transition to the point of sales terminals, which exist at every single store. So that BMS, that business management system attack vectors, are so important
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of organizations are noticing that they're on this flat network where the HVAC, the BMS systems are on the same network as those important and critical systems within an organization.
And I'm saying that for Target as an enterprise, there's also a big IT part, so at least they have a security team. But you go to again a company that manages buildings today, there's no security team. They don't have a large IT. It's just that the OT operation, and so I think it's a different angle of a problem, which will require its own sort of story on how to solve that.
Well, with that said, I would like to thank you, Mr. Rosenberg, for coming to ICS with Gabe. I think we went over a breadth of information for those early career starters, all the way to those very experienced professionals. Where pretty much we went over your story of starting off as an electrical engineer, then you transitioned into cybersecurity through the military. We also got into a lot of the things that you're involved in now, and even your thoughts as it concerns some of the ideas and ideology of the hackers today, and even some investments with Elron organization that you're a part of, where you sit as the CSO. Are there any other ideas or things that you want to leave with the viewers before we get out of here? And we kind of leave them. Want to leave them with any closing thoughts?
No, I think as you said, we've gone through quite a long way in just a little short of an hour. So I want to thank you very much. I had enjoyed it very much.
And as well, I enjoyed it myself. And thank you for coming on, Mr. Rosenberg, for giving us some of your time and expertise. And thank you all for listening to ICS with Gabe. And probably we can do some type of part two going down the line as things progress in cybersecurity. But just as I always say, thank you again for attending and listening to ICS with Gabe. Thanks.